Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to today's webinar on Living with the Land. My name is Chaitali, and I am the co-founder of Land Insight, which is dedicated to deepening relationships between the living Earth systems. We are recording this call, so if any one of you doesn't wish to be recorded, please feel free to turn your cameras off. I request everyone to turn your mics off. We have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so if you may have any questions or comments, please speak during the Q&A segment, and the chat is always open for pressing ideas. Before we begin, please allow me to speak a little bit about Land Insight. At Land Insight, our mission is to create learning opportunities that bring together the wisdom of land and the skills of conscious design. Our courses, workshops, and webinars aim to inspire and equip people with knowledge that fosters respect to the land. Whether you are a designer or a permaculture enthusiast or simply someone seeking deeper connections with the world around you. I'd like to take a moment to thank the Institute of Relational Being and its co-founder, Joe Culhane. IRB has provided technical support for this webinar and for the course, and I encourage you to explore their work. I'll share the link to their website towards the end of this webinar. And before I introduce our speakers for the day, I would like to remember our dear friend and my teacher, Dr. Stephen Harding, who passed away recently, and he has inspired me in many ways. So I want to remember him before we start this webinar. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Per Ingvar Hawkland. Per Ingvar is a professor and an eco-philosopher at the University of Southeastern Norway, linked to the Outdoor Life Studies program. Per Ingvar has worked with philosopher Arne Næss for close to 20 years, including the books Life's Philosophy and Deep Joy, into the depths of Deep Ecology. He has worked for 15 years as a center leader and senior participatory action researcher at the Center for Nature Culture-Based Innovation at Telemark Research Institute. He is currently researching developing a sense of indigeneity, learning from the Sami, Kwen, and Norse traditions in Norway as ways of bridging the past and the future in ways that are both broadly sustainable and land responsive. And Karina is a deep ecology specialist trained at Gaia Education, Sharing Nature, and Schumacher College, learning from luminaries like Stephen Harding, Joanna Macy, and John Seed. Deep ecology shapes her work, bridging logic and intuition across workshops, mentoring activism, writing, and academic research. Over 10 years, she has applied this philosophy to the climate change adaptation, including a project in Australian Alps with La Trobe University. Karina also fundraised for the Gondwana Foundation to protect the Daintree rainforest and publish Changemakers, The Courage to Transform the World. Since 2019, she has mentored changemakers, empowering transformation in action. And now, I hand over to Per Ingvar. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Chaitali. Wonderful, and for this nice introduction and for putting this together. And it's very nice to be here, also with you, Karina, to share some thoughts about this course we have been planning. And it's nice also to see, I see some recognizable names there, among them Jan, I think. And what I would just greet everyone who is there. And I'm speaking now from the land of ice and midnight sun. Actually, I was just showing Chaitali here. This is just outside our university right now in the moment. The sun is going down, but we are having a nice day today. And I do speak also in the honor of the people of this land. Actually, there are people who have long histories in this land. So I use the term Scandinatives in some ways. In Scandinavia, there are three strands of people going back 12,000 years. Among them, the Norse, which I belong to, and then there is the Kven and the Sami, the Kven being the Finnish strand. And there are interesting still remnants of these strands into our culture today, but it has, or into our land today, but it has certainly been influenced by by monopoly of the church and state and the modern industrial culture. So what I'd like to speak to you today also are the efforts that we try to do, and I've tried to participate in helping reconnect to nature and through animistic cultures. We have, my name is Per Ingvar Hakeland, and it's interesting how Ingvar is coming also from the Norse Ingvar, the protector of the goddess of fertility and love, Frøya. My wife is called Frøydis, also linked to Frøydis, so we have a sort of link together. But it's also my last name, Hawkland, this land of the hawks, who is which is coming from the west coast, a farm that dates back to before the Viking Age. So there's long histories in this land, and as Chaitali was mentioning, I'm a professor now at the University of Southeast Norway, and working on a field of outer life studies, but mostly from the position of eco-philosophy and deep ecology and pedagogy. But I studied in the States for 10 years, and there are two encounters there that I may introduce you to some of the perspective I had. I encountered a Hopi elder called Thomas Baniakia, who actually I was wanting to learn his understanding of the land. This was back in 1989. And I just finished my master's in eco-philosophy, and I was exploring ways outward to find out, who are the people who can really teach me to live in and with the land. And I thought, well, the Native Americans would be certainly one. And I explored. I met with this Thomas, and he told me that what I need to do is, in a way, explore my own past in some way, my own histories, and to try to reconnect to my own past. And by doing that, I returned back to Norway, and I realized that my grandfather, who I knew from a childhood as just a farmer, he had an animistic outlook on life. He had a sort of understanding of the nature spirits, and he could to have a relational understanding of nature as not just dead objects but alive. So it's quite interesting that if you go into your own histories, you will find strands there that connects you deeply to the land. And this is what I speak of as a sort of sense of indigeneity that we all are integral to. So instead of, we can search other cultures in order to learn from their ways of living in the land, like I do now with the Sami people who have perhaps in Norway maintain a strong sense of practice, living and learning from the land. But there are still in the Norse traditions, there are rural cultural folks who live very close to nature and to have these animistic perspectives. So you can learn from others, but you're searching in a way to discover things in your own life, how you are yourself connected to the land. And that's partly what I've been working over the last 10 years or so. And in this context, I can see that deep ecology is certainly one that helps us open this door, because deep ecology is searching for, it's from Arne Næss, who coined the term deep ecology. He didn't coin it as a philosophy or a religion of some sort, but rather as a process, a movement towards reconnecting to what we could say is the land. He would speak of it as the ecology of life or the web of life. But in many respects, the eco notion, the prefix eco in this sense, is understood as the interplay between nature, culture, community, and selves. But these interplays, for example, can be described as the land. So what is reconnecting is not just to nature, but to the land. Many indigenous people don't speak of nature really. It's not something they speak of, just rather life or the land or just being. And so I too want to explore the land as that which is the power of life that we connect to in the sense of deep ecology. And I feel that what Arne Næss was opening up for is also to go against this or critique this Western cultural mindset that sees nature or the land as something of an arena out there. It's something like almost mechanistically there as a machine for our purposes. We can just harvest from the land as we please, or it's just our resources. We define the land in terms of private property and so on, which is very, very strange if you see it from an indigenous perspective. You are really not owning the land. You're simply there as a tenant or simply there as a borrower of the land. So in a way, reconnecting to these forces of the land has an element of both very practical things. So learning to reconnect to where the food comes from, the water, where the animals and how we can find shelter and how we live in the land, how we have lived in the land. And at the same time, you reanimate it. You go against this sort of mechanistic, anthropocentric position in trying to enchant the world again. See the land as actually powers, as living entities there. There's the forest folks and there's the rivers and the waters, and all that is actually living entities. They are not dead objects for our purposes like instruments. They're actually living beings, personalities that we connect to. And by connecting to them, we're connecting to something deeper in ourselves as well. So deep ecology opens up for that sort of animistic enchantment, what you could say, an opening and paying attention to these powers. And the way I think Arne Næss was introducing this is like he said that in order for the deep ecology movement to sort of make a change in the world, it has to grapple with the way we think and the way we act and try to find ways of connecting and make more integral how we think with what we do, so that there are a more link between the values of what we find valuable in life and how we live our lives. And that is a challenge for many of us, is there's a huge gap between what we believe and what we see is valuable and how we live our lives. And deep ecology is searching to find a bridge between ways of seeing, ways of becoming aware with how we act. And he describes this in what he calls an apron diagram, and some of you are familiar with that. But I describe this more like a life tree diagram. And in this course, we will be able to explore various aspects of this life tree, how we can ourselves, individually and in community, connect to the land where we live and where we work and where we have a sense of home. And the way I see it is that the tree has four aspects to it. And the one is the root systems. And the roots of the tree are the experiences, the depth of experiences. And it is something like encounters and the experience of reconnecting that creates the spark of change in one's life. So we have to explore actually these direct, spontaneous experiences in the world. We have to explore what that means. How do we encounter the other? How do we enchant those powers of the land? And from the depth of experience is growing a depth of awareness. or a consciousness, but more an awareness of what matters, what is at stake here, what values brings forth, what surfaces in the encounters. And that's why I call the trunk. It is what sort of stands upright. It's what carries the ground, so to speak. Then the third is the branches of the tree. And that's very many different branches. We could place it like this. We are moving in different areas in our lives. And in these different areas, you can call one area a branch. It could be like you're a family member, or you're a worker, you're a citizen, you're a consumer. And in all these areas, there are things that prevents us from moving forward with what matters to us. There's things that helps us. So there are helpers in the land, and there are stumbling blocks in the land, but we are exploring these. The fourth and the final aspect I'll touch on here is the flowers and the fruits of the tree, which is then linked to the depth of commitment in transition. So it's that which makes integral or makes consequent your deeper mattering. So in a way, that comes to the action aspect of it. So what are you doing? In these with these insights. So these four aspects is something that the course is structured around a little bit. So this is something we will be talking about, exploring, and then also you yourself will experiment with it. So that I think is perhaps enough in the beginning as a sharing here. If I have maybe a couple of minutes, maybe I share one story if I can. Do I have time for that?
Yeah,
A short
you've got
story.
a couple of minutes.
Couple of minutes. Good. Nice. So when I grew up outside of Kongsberg, I was playing a lot in the forest, and it was an enchanted forest. It was like the forest was we were playing it, and it was alive in some ways. My brother Lars, who was 2 years older than me, he said that when we put camp, we should go up and ask for permission in that area to camp. So I was about 5, 6 years old, and I asked and he told me that okay, now you have to go and ask for permission to camp. So I went up and I looked at the huge tree, huge pine tree that I found, and so I put my hand to its bark and I felt it, and I didn't know what to say. I was kind of unsure, but what happened is I felt this warmth from my hand and the bark of the tree. It's almost like the tree touched me as I was touching it. And when we were like that, I was sort of thrown back a little bit. And when I looked up, it was almost like the tree came forth and it said, thank you for asking, and you are most welcome to stay here. And as I was doing that, I was 5, 6 years. This is created the spark. That was the depth of experience that has really brought the whole life of commitment to the old growth forest, to forest protection, trees, the seeing each and one tree. It was the first time I actually spoke to another being that was not human in that sense. You know, it was very, very powerful. And when I was finished with my doctorate in Berkeley, I came back from Berkeley then in '97. I wanted to go up to this tree to thank it, thank it for what they had opened for me. And as I came over this place where we had saw the hillside there, I actually came up and I was stunned because the whole area was deforested. So it was all cut down. And I was searching out to find the stump of the tree. And I found this huge stump. And I sat down and became very sad. You know, this is kind of what many people talk about an eco grief in some sense, since that the loss of connection, what that does, it should be a housing place. This thing was declared for housing. So we need houses, but still, it was so sad about this one people who just cut down these trees without knowing that personal kind of history of this one big tree, and that this kind of experience of grief and of loss, at the same time as an experience of connection and joy, is really what life is about these days. You know, we live in a special, very special time, and we have to find ways to handle that. But I think it's something we would open for in the course. Thank you.
Thank you, Peringwar. That was very interesting and inspiring. And now over to you, Karina.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm very much passionate human about the non-human world. And nature is my temple. It's where I can deeply connect with the divine. Everything I do is always asking myself, in terms of professional engagement, how am I helping humans and more than humans somehow? So, professional background, environmental journalist, deep ecologist, speaker's coach, curator, but only with one goal: how can I support the more than humans beyond the humans? And this way of seeing things and this way of living also started in childhood for me. I used to talk to trees as well, and to the sun and to the moon, and this was my little secret. And I used to hear the answers back. And I can relate very much to what you shared there, that this shaped who I am and what I do. So since from a very young age, let's say, I already knew that I was here to work for this planet. I lived and worked in the Amazon rainforest for 5 years, and I advocated a lot as an activist, frontline activist, till I had the burnout I had, and then I started asking myself, what's wrong with information? After a long, long time searching for answers, when I started studying deep ecology, I understood that information is not enough. And that to give a step forward into the speed that we need to change the state of things and to access the critical mass and help more and more people to connect with the earth in a deeper level, we have to put emotions with the thinking together. Then I ended up studying at Schumacher College. Stephen Harding was my dearest friend and professor. And I learned that deep ecology is a philosophy. And I'm very, very grateful for LAND-RESPONSIVENESS for downloading this philosophy and movement. Why end movement? Because it's not supposed to be only in the thinking realm or in the emotional realm. Deep ecology needs to eventually become an action. And this action is pretty much connected to what we think and connected to what we feel. The more you study deep ecology, the more your lens about life start to unfold, to develop, to expand. You look at fruit, and it's not just a fruit anymore, it's a gift. You look at the clouds, and they are not just the clouds anymore, they are friends. And so on with every other being that it's not a human, right? So I would say that deep ecology is a pathway forward, a bridge that connects the ancestral wisdom from indigenous peoples from all over the world with the ancestor future that we aim to achieve, present and future. And then I bring a little bit the Native Americans here too, because I like very much what Crazy Horse once shared. He said, The old ways will be back, my friend. He said that to people that were planning to kill him. And before they killed him, these words became eternal. And what he meant by that is that we would start learning the old ways. What we are talking here may sound a little bit like a fantasy for many people. But whether they like it or not, whether they accept it or not, truth is, every being is sentient, every being is sacred, every being communicates, and the more we live with the land in harmony, seeing everything as sacred and honoring it, the better we will find, we will create a new reality for all of us. And when I say all of us, I don't mean only human beings. And once you start studying deep ecology, you start asking yourself so many questions that also lead to different ways of relating to yourself, to the people around you, to the land, to the modern humans. And bringing a little bit the land here, one thing that I learned from Indigenous Australians, they always use this expression, honoring country. They call the land country, honoring country, being in country. What they mean by this country is the soil, it's the land that sustained them and their ancestors. It's where the stories are. It's where the vitality, it's where the life force lies. It's where tradition, philosophy, spirituality, food lies. So honoring country, honoring the land goes way beyond what most people in our society would think. Like, oh, let's not use pesticides on the land. Fine, that's a good step. But it goes beyond. It goes to treating the land and to treating country, the place where we were born, the place that sustains our feet whenever we are in the world, with a sacred respect. So I would love to invite each one of you, including me or Ingvar and Land Insight, Chaitali, to, once this conversation is over, maybe a way of honoring and connecting to country, to land, maybe just giving few footsteps with mindfulness, remembering that we are walking on Mother Earth, maybe back, maybe arm, maybe neck, maybe head. We are walking over a sacred body. So let's walk with gentleness. This is my suggestion. Let's walk in mindfulness and gentleness to connect with the land that we are on. So if you aim to learn more about deep ecology and to join us on these weeks, I should say to you, giving a heads up, that probably this course is going to change your life, but it's going to change your life for the better. You're going to learn and you're going to feel. This is not a conversation only to your brain. It's going to be mostly to your heart and to your hands. I think I will stop for now and lead it back to you. Thank you very much for listening to me and for being here.
Thank you, Karina, for sharing your insights. This is beautiful, and I am full with so much love and respect for the all beings around. Thank you so much, both of you. Now we have space open for questions. or comments or anything that you would like to share or ask, please feel free to unmute yourself.
I know Pierre already shared some personal story. I'm just wondering if there's any other kind of intimate story that you'd like to share of connection to the more than human that kind of made a before and after, or just changed a bit the relation you have with life, I guess. Thank you.
Well, I guess we could both, Corinne and I, share a few other stories, I guess. One of the crucial story, I guess the most recent one, is that this summer, our house in Bø in Telemark, where I live in the rural part of Telemark in the mountains of the south, we live in a foothill of a mountain of Lifjell, and in this foothill, we live in a place that is quite safe for flooding, but still our house was taken by flood, and it reached all the news in Norway, all the main papers and televisions and so on, because it is a house that is taken by the flood in a floods-free zone, which shows you the extremity of what is going on with our mother in some sense, you know. And especially they were putting me on the television because they were seeing there's an eco-philosopher who's taken by the flood, you know. So what is he thinking about this? And well, there's so much to say about it. It's hard to say, but the point is that this creek that runs behind our house is a very small creek that is barely water in the summer, and it grew many meters and turned into a waterfall, and it just took the house with it. It went over its borders. And I have a lot of what Stephen Harding, my dear friend, and I, when we teach courses in Gaia and Deep Ecology, we call it Gaia spots, or we call it like sit spots up along the creek. And I've been sitting with the creek and speaking to the creek about my concern and so on. And so some of the things I thought is that our house is, the way I live now is really trapped in some ways. I feel trapped a little bit where I live. I lived in the middle of the forest, but then they took the whole forest down and put it into a housing complex. So now I live in the middle house. I don't know how to move from this place because I cannot move from that place because it's my children's home. And what can I do? I feel stuck. I cannot move. And the creek was responding to this, but I don't understand in what way it could respond so bluntly that it actually took the house away. I mean, that's like very directly response, and I thought, my goodness, what's going on? But it opened something in my life right now. I'm homeless. I have no home now, so something is opening. And when I came there 3-4 days after the flood, and the house is still standing. It's just 20 degrees. It stands like this. It's going to be demolished because it's impossible to live in. But the house itself is another living being. So when I come in there, I see the house, I get really sad because the house is almost like its skeletons are being torn from the inside. Even though it looks nice from the outside, its inside is really dying. And I walked up to the creek, and the creek looked like a dog, you know, when it has the ears behind and the tail underneath its legs. And it was so sad. It was incredibly sad. And it just sort of, I tried to keep this water away, but it came like a flash flood coming from above in the mountain. I had no way to deal with it, and I'm thinking it felt like it had done something wrong, but we were talking a lot about it, and it just said it's not your fault. I mean, you had no ways of dealing with these higher powers that were going on, and it felt better with that, and so on. And I have a dear relationship to this creek. And as I was sitting there, I was also met by several birds. I have some of my best neighbors, good neighbors are birds. And of course, deer, and there's badgers. There's lots of animals around that I have as my good neighbors. And I was speaking to these birds about what was going on. And the birds were actually they were so feeling so sorrow, so sad about what had happened. And they came up and they came and sat on my shoulder and on my head and my leg. And he was always like, "How are you doing?" You know, it's like, "Are you okay? What's with the family? Your daughter was there. What's happened with her? Is everything is okay?" And I met this family of birds several generations. We've had maybe, 8, 10 generations of meeting with them. So we know them intimately, each and one of them. I've saved them and they've saved me earlier in life. And so in a way they cared. So I felt like now I'm kind of in a mind boggle, because I feel like it'd be bad to leave them in some ways. If I leave this area, I would leave these dear neighbors of mine. I mean, there's lots of other human neighbors there. I don't have too much with them, but they're still there and they're important, and I feel okay. But these neighbors here, and the pine and the birch, these are really very special to me. And I think that's something I have so much experiences with that. And I think that what we need to understand when we're reconnecting to the land, we're reconnecting to a more than human community also. So all these beings are part of our community. They're part of our neighborhood. They're our neighbors. And when you start thinking like that, when you're working like that, things will open up in a whole new way. Maybe Karina wants to share.
Wow, what a story. I have a very good story as well. I think that one that comes to mind for me to share. Okay, I'm gonna let you choose, guys. Do you want to hear a story about a conversation I had with a tree in California or in the Amazon rainforest? California, do this. Amazon rainforest. California? What do you want?
California.
Amazon.
Sounds nice.
Amazon.
Looks like California.
Looks like California. All right. So when I lived in the United States, I had this sport, which was climbing trees, giant trees. Of course, with a tree climber, and it was legal to do it. And I was climbing with my instructor, and we were going up on a redwood tree that belonged to, like, it wasn't a private property, and we were climbing. And I didn't pay attention to anything because I was just focused on the technique. This was way before Deep Ecology, but I was always has always been an animistic, as I told you, talking to other beings since childhood, right? So I was climbing, and then suddenly I started hearing like noise in the forest, and it was like, ooh, and the sound were becoming louder and louder. When I looked down and I noticed that the car was this big, and I then realized how high I was up on the tree, and I freaked out. And then I realized also that the wind that was coming, it was the wind. And then when the wind hit the tree, as I was at the top of a tree without realizing it before, the tree started doing this. weaving, right? This is what happens. And I was at the top of the tree weaving. I freaked out. And then my teacher was like, no worries, you don't have to worry. I'm gonna lock you on me. And I said, no, stop talking. I don't need you now. I need the tree. And then I hugged a branch that was like in front of me. And I hugged a branch and I was like weaving with the tree, hugging and feeling, oh my God, I need you. Hold me, please. Hold me, please. Okay, fine. Okay, we had this experience. And we came back home. And this tree kept calling me back the entire week. The entire week, I kept listening. You should go back. You should go back. Go back. Go back to the tree. The tree's calling you. The tree's calling you back. The tree. I was like, oh my God, the tree's calling. Then I talked to the instructor and I said, okay, would you be okay if we came back to that same tree? He was like, okay, but this time I'm going to be teaching a different student and I won't be able to climb the tree with you. You will have to climb by yourself. And I said, fine. There I was again, climbing the tree very slowly. This time I was looking around with awareness, okay. And I climbing a little bit more awareness, seeing the car becoming smaller and smaller, taller. I was higher and higher up on the tree. And then, if you're not familiar with redwoods, like redwoods are other giant trees. They belong to the sequoia family. And then I saw myself in front of the trunk, which was right huge. And I felt I should connect with the tree when I always do when a tree calls me, and it's like I just put this chakra here on the tree and I have a conversation with the tree like this. It's like, okay, I'm here. You asked me to be here again. Talk to me. I'm here. And then the tree started speaking to me. And the message of God was, I'm inviting you back because I want to teach you the lesson of trust. First, you need to trust me. Trust me. I've been here for more than 2,000 years. I've seen so many things happening. How come I'm going to break with this little wind? No way. I'm strong. I'm holding you. Trust me. Also, you've got to trust yourself. And look, sometimes you think you don't trust yourself enough. But are you sure about that? Because you brought yourself back here and you're hanging on me through ropes and a carabiner. You're hanging on me. Are you sure you don't trust yourself? Oh, pay attention. You trust yourself more than what you think. And then the last message was, I also invited you here so you can trust life. Trust life. Trust life is doing the best for you. Then I just kept holding, like touching the trunk, and I didn't want to go down, and I just turned my back into the trunk, and then I was hanging, looking at the forest, being handled by the ropes and just looking at the rainforest on the top of this redwood. And I stayed there for I don't know how much time. And when it came the time for me to come back, there was a little problem on the rope, on the knot, and I couldn't go down. But then I remembered the lesson of trust. And my instructor was standing up on the other redwood. They were close by, and I started like screaming at him. It's like, okay, I'm stuck. What do I do? Then he started explaining to me what should I do to be able to come down in safety. And I was like, okay, it's time to trust myself better. And then I gave thanks to this tree, and I came down, and this tree became one of my masters, because throughout my life, from time to time, I need to remember this lesson to come back to myself. And one thing that I learned with David Abram when we were having a class at Schumacher College is that we can connect with our beloved trees and other non-humans since wherever we are. So if I close my eyes, I can just connect with that tree again and say thank you to her, independently if she's still there or not. So this is something for you, Per, if you want to say hello to your tree.
That was
And
fantastic.
yeah, so this is it. Like sometimes I connect to that tree because it's one of my masters, one of my guides in life.
Yeah.
This was one of the greatest lessons I've received from my friends, the trees.
Wow, wonderful. It just sparks so much in me when you speak also. If I may share another couple of one other story that is, I think, linked to this, is that when I was 19 years old, I hitchhiked around the States, and I came from the Midwest to California, actually, and I came to a place called Green Gulch Buddhist Center near the John Muir Redwood Forest Park. And I just loved hanging out with the Redwood Forest. Later, actually, I found John Muir to be one of my inspirational writers. Some of you may know John Muir as a naturalist in the States, and he's famous for saying something like he was the one who invented or established the Yosemite National Park and so on, and he was doing something like you were doing. When it was a storm, a windstorm, he would climb the tree, and just to be there and feel that kind of connectedness by letting the tree swing from one end to the other. And he said this was in the 1890s, for 120, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. He said that one day I walked out, and I stayed out all day because I really found out that walking out was walking in, coming in. And in Norway, we have this concept, we're not going out to nature, but we're going into nature. Not many of us speak of that. And it's similar to what David Abram, another of our colleagues who we started Alliance for Wild Ethics with, together with David and Stefan and Per Espen. And what David is saying is that, you really, when you're going out with this way of seeing, you're actually seeing yourself from that which you encounter. So it's like going out is coming in to your larger flesh, your larger mind in some sense. And that is also connected to the land, that the intelligence of the land is also what you connect to. And when I was at this Buddhist center, that's why I was kind of linked. That happened to be a summer when Thich Nhat Hanh was a Buddhist monk in this. Some of you may know who Thich Nhat Hanh is, as a famous Zen Buddhist monk. And I didn't know him at a time at all. I didn't have no clue who he was. But he was the most peaceful person I've ever met. And he continued to show us ways of connecting to the land. We had the walking meditation around the Buddhist center and so on. And he has this one poem I thought I would read. There's two poems I would like to share with you, which is linked to, I think, what Karina's sharing and which has to do with this connection. And the one poem is called Interbeing. That's a poem by Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, "The sun has entered me. The sun has entered me together with the cloud and the river. I myself have entered the river, and I have entered the sun with the cloud and the river. There has not been a moment when we do not interpenetrate. But before the sun entered me, the sun was in me, also the cloud and the river. Before I entered the river, I was already in it. There has not been a moment when we have not interbeen. Therefore, you know that as long as you continue to breathe, I continue to be in you." So is this connection that we aren't really separate. It's not you and the land. You are integral to that. These powers work within you as is in the land. You have the sun in you. You have the breath and the water. We are earth. That is something we need to explore more of. Another poem, as a final poem I share, is from one of my favorite poets, Mary Oliver, who says, "When I am among the trees," linked to also what both Karina shared and I shared there with the trees. Mary Oliver writes, "When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, 'Stay, stay a while.' The light flows from their branches, and they call again. 'It's simple,' they say, 'and you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine.'" The message from the more than human. Thank you, Karina, for sharing. Wonderful that this opened up. This thing just came to me as you were speaking.
Thank you for doing this.
I have a little story to share of what you said, Beringwa, that we are a part of the land. When I was writing my dissertation back at Schumacher College, I also had an honor of walking along with a teacher and a friend from the college in the lowlands of Scotland. And I was being guided by him as I walked in the lowlands. And before I joined Schumacher College, I was trained as an architect and as a permaculture designer. And during my studies there, a more intuitive side of getting to know myself and the world around developed. And it all culminated into that walk in the lowlands, where the more I was walking on the land, the more I was getting to know of myself. And the more I was getting to know of myself, the more I was getting to know about the land. And that was a relationship that was getting built. And that for me was so life changing that I thought that I want to bring this out and I want to share this with more and more people. And after a year now, doing this course, I feel Deep Ecology will provide a nice gateway to start having, to start sharing these kind of experiences and to also learn in depth about what it means to be in respect and in tune and in circle with the more than humans around us. So yeah, I hope you all join us, and I hope we are able to experience things together. Yeah, thank you for listening. We do have time for one quick question if anybody has.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
I was just wondering, I'm not necessarily so aware of deep ecology, or I come from like an environmental science background and have studied some Indigenous studies, but I feel like something we've talked about before is the idea of giving aspects of nature like a voice in like legal ideas, or giving a river like a legal identity and nature protection, or yeah, the idea of giving different aspects of nature a voice in relation to climate protection or environmental protection. And then I was thinking about this more, and then this can feel like a very anthropocentric perspective that you're trying to give a tree a voice from your human perspective, and how can a human ever give that perspective to a tree, if that makes sense. So I guess I was just wondering from a deep ecology perspective how you view things like giving a legal voice to a part of nature.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you very much for sharing that. It's such a good question, also important question. I think there's many layers to it, but just to get briefly, this is something we could explore in the course in some ways. But one thing is that there are two forms of anthropocentrism. One is the form that is placing all of life, or humans, in the center of all of life. Everything revolves around the human. So everything that has value in light of human. That is sort of the more what I would call a narrow or a narrow anthropocentrism. But there is that open anthropocentrism, which speaks more phenomenologically about you are looking to in the world. You are yourself a center of your experience and your sense of responsibility in the world. So that's a kind of open anthropocentrism, doesn't exclude the more than human. So the human and the more than human is linked to that kind of open sense. So anthropocentrism is like with ecocentrism. Ecocentrism doesn't mean you exclude humans in there. It's something that the dualistic Western pattern is hard to grasp. So that's one element to it. The second is, what about giving voice? How do we know that we're not just constructing in the human sense the voice? Well, this is also where the field of phenomenology, and David Abram has spoken a lot to this, but it's and also Arne Næss, and it is in the process of the ecological self. And in our being, we all have the capacity to identify with another. So we are able to actually, through the sense of extending our feel to another being. So let's say when you see the pain of a pig being hurt or a dog being mistreated, you can sense that pain in you. It's almost like you can feel the world from within the being of the other. It's not like you are the other. It's just that you can feel what the other feels in some ways. And that's why you're starting, when you're speaking to the voice, you are actually discerning. That's what Mary Oliver is about. She's trying to discern, what is it from me and what is it from the other? And how can we then discern what ways forward is in this voice? And there are lots of people now, among them Per Espen's wife, who works in broad organizations, who looks at how can we do this in policy and environmental discussion on aerial planning and so on, in order to bring forth the voices of the others without anthropocentrism in the narrow sense, if you see what I mean. So this is something that is really a very, very good question, and something we really need to address and speak more to. Thank you for sharing, Felicity.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your questions, and thank you, Perengwar, for your response. If any one of you still has any further questions, please do write to us at Land Insight. We need to now bring this webinar to a close. If you have any questions, please write to us, and I'll make sure to forward it to Karina and Perengwar. And now we must bring this to an end. Before we end, I would like to share a couple of links with you all. It is a small feedback form if you could fill, and a couple of other helpful links. I also have a little poem to share from Rabindranath Tagore. It's actually a very long poem, but I'm just going to read a little bit from the beginning and in the end, and I'll share the poem in a follow-up email with you all. So it's a Bengali poem. Bengali is an Indian language, and it's translated into English. So the poem goes, accept my homage, earth, as I make my last obeisance of the day, bowed at the altar of setting sun. You are mighty and knowledgeable only by the mighty. You counterpoise charm and severity, compounded of male and female. You sway human life with unbearable conflict. The cup that your right hand fills with nectar is smashed by your left. Your playground rings with your mocking laughter. Towards the end of this poetry, he says, if I have won from the trials of life a scrap of success, then mark my brow with a sign made from your clay, to be rubbed out in time by the night, in which all signs fade into the final unknown. O aloof, ruthless earth, before I am utterly forgotten, let me place my homage at your feet. By Rabindranath Tagore. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and I hope to see you all in the course, and I'll keep in touch with you through emails. Thank you.